Welcome back, Attack. Today we're going to do a first impression here on Blade & Soul. It's really going to be more of an overview. I just kind of want to talk about some of the features and what I got to experience in my first, few minutes playing the game. Overall, okay, start the game. Character creator is pretty decent. Actually, it's really good. You're not going to have the kind of like races that you'd expect in something like World of Warcraft or WildStar or Guild Wars 2, where you have like all these different varied races. For the most part, they look very human. They look very normal, okay? You're not going to have any elves or anything like that. You do have these Lin, okay? They're kind of like animalistic. They do have animal ears, but for the most part, very usual humans, okay? But saying that, the character customization in that is actually really good. You have really freaking awesome hairstyles, of course, coming from the East. They always have really ridiculous hair, and it makes sense, and it works in this game, and I really appreciate it. Really gorgeous people overall. You know, the art in this game is great, but it really shines in the characters, okay? Yes, I know there's a little bit of controversy with how sexual everything is, but I think it's not sexist, okay? It's not just women, it's also men, incredibly glorified with all the shapes and, everything like that. I'm not going to go into it, but I think overall it's just very sexy. And yes, the art is anime-inspired, so keep that in mind. It is not chibi anime, it's not cartoon anime, but it's more like trying to take anime inspirations and bring it to real life, and that is the art of Blade & Soul. And then mix in Kung Fu, and you got a freaking awesome world to go and explore. But character creator, it's pretty good. It's got sliders, it's got really interesting presets, and you can make the character that you want. It's not Black Desert, okay, it's not as amazing as Black Desert, and it's not as varied or as crazy as WildStar because of the races, but for what it is, for, its world, it's really freaking good. One of the best character creators out there. Really simple, easy to use. I love it. So yeah, you make your character and you have a couple of different classes. These classes, I can say, they at the beginning, they kind of feel similar-ish. They do have different aesthetics, of course, absolutely. You have Blade Master, Destroyer, Summoner, Force Master, Kung Fu Master, Assassin, and Blade Dancer. Now, these different classes, don't worry guys, all the classes, you're going to all have your base Kung Fu moveset. These are your traversal abilities. So yeah, in Blade & Soul, you probably saw the cinematics and the cutscenes and the trailers where your character is jumping through the air, doing somersaults, gliding, doing all sorts of crazy, wicked stuff. Yeah, every class can do that. Every race can do that. Don't worry about that. Everybody has your own mobility stuffs. However, saying that, when you go into combat, you can't do those mobility things anymore, which kind of sucks. It's a little bit of immersion breaking for me, but everybody has that, okay? So whenever you enter combat, that's when your class is really glorified. Anyways, so I got to play a lot as the Summoner. I thought that was going to be a really unique class. It's one of the newer classes to Blade & Soul, luckily coming over with this translation. Like Dragon Nest, right? Dragon Nest, whenever it was moved over to the West, the localization, we don't get all the classes and all the characters. We don't get those as soon as they come out. So it's pretty cool that Blade & Soul is allowing us to get the Summoner right here. But you do have some heavy hitters, more tanky characters like the Destroyer. You do have mages like the Force Master and Summoner. And then you do have your Kung Fu Master, which I think is probably going to be one of the more unique classes, because what other game really do you have a Kung Fu Master? You have World of Warcraft with a Monk, which is kind of martial arts oriented. But for the most part, you don't really have games or MMOs that allow you to fight. Of course, we have games like Age of Wushu, we have Yule Gang 2, and Swordsman Online. We do have some sort of like Kung Fu games out there, but overall, in my opinion, Blade & Soul is absolutely the best so far. Though I do think there is a niche for Age of Wushu. I think Age of Wushu actually is doing pretty okay. But Blade & Soul, oh my god. Just like, look at the graphics. Look at it. It's beautiful. Yes. And, yeah, so all the different classes, I don't think they're as unique or as varied as Guild Wars 2, where they, like, in Guild Wars 2, every class has its own resource system, own combo system, totally unique, like, entire sets of abilities. This game, Blade & Soul, it seems like it's a little bit less varied, but at the same time, it's pretty good. I think it's okay. Now, I haven't really gotten too deep into it, so I don't know how the different abilities can really combo with them. That's just a first impression. It's just me just kind of, spitting shit at your face. Overall, I don't think it's as unique as Guild Wars 2. But then again, guys, all the different, or just the idea of Blade & Soul in its entirety, a Kung Fu game that actually feels action-based, and, that in itself is an original idea. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the game isn't original, or isn't mechanical in a unique way. It is. It absolutely is. I'm just saying that the different classes, how they play between each other, they're actually somewhat similar, especially because it is a Kung Fu game, so some of the abilities are somewhat similar. Though they do play different roles, some of these different classes can play different roles, I understand that. It's just overall, game feeling-wise, some of these classes might play out kind of similarly. Like the Summoner and the Force Master, you kind of just circle strafe a little bit and just kind of cast your abilities. It's, you know, somewhat similar, at least in the beginning of the game. It might change later on. I'm just saying, those are first impressions, guys. Okay, hands up. Hey, don't kill me. But anyways, so you do have different classes, and some of these classes are locked to different races, so keep that in mind. And I do believe there is a race that is actually female only, but you do have races and factions. But the factions don't work like in the way that you would expect in World of Warcraft. But anyways, so the races, we have the Gon, okay, these are like bigger dudes, like they're bigger, muscular, or females as well. And then you have the Lin. This is my personal favorite race here. They're the most adorable. They're very cute. They're kind of animalistic and they look childish, but even though they look childish, they actually are they're much older, I do believe. So you can be male and female with the Lin. And then next we have the Yun. Yun is just female, okay? And apparently they are, what it says right here, intrinsically entwined to the natural world. Overall, they just seem like a very slender human. They're not as beefy or as muscular, maybe, or as big as the Gon. But anyways, the Yun is female only. And then we have the Jin, which is male and female. And these kind of just look like your normal human, stereotypical kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure. But each of these races do have their own unique customization. They have their own unique presets, and you have, you know, unique hairstyles and the way the sliders interact with the skeletal and stuff. Yeah, so you can make a pretty good character, but you have a limited amount of races. You know, like I said, from World of Warcraft or WildStar, you don't have a bunch of different races, but the customization that you do have with these guys is pretty good. And now, once you click and make your character, once you do and you do all that good stuff, you click the class and everything, you go into the game, you find that it is incredibly cinematic. Okay, like basically for your first 30 minutes, like 25 minutes of that is just cinematic. And that is just my first impressions, but I imagine that as we play through the game, it is actually still going to be quite episodic, quite cinematic, periodically. However, I'm in a point right now in the game where I'm doing very usual quests, you know, kill 5 of this, gather 5 of that, etc., etc. But even though just doing these quests, there are still cutscenes while in between I'm doing these quests. So it feels pretty good. If I had to relate it to anything very popular right now, it would be kind of like Guild Wars 2, you know, kind of. You still have usual questing, and it is a very instance-based world. So, how do I describe this gameplay? It's kind of more similar to Terra, where it's a lot of instances, okay? There's a lot of invisible walls as well. You can't just go and fly on your mount like in World of Warcraft. It really kind of feels more like an online action RPG, especially considering how, like, story entwined the game is. In Guild Wars 2, the story kind of intertwines with other players, and it kind of works out in the end. It just works. In this game, there is a little bit of immersion breaking with your story, because you are kind of like a chosen one. You are a student. I guess maybe it can be rationale that, I don't want to spoil anything, because actually the story is kind of interesting. And anyways, basically it comes down to you are a chosen one, and then you are put into a massively multiplayer online world where all these other players are chosen ones. And yeah, that's just kind of how it works. I don't know how the story evolves from there, if maybe just the start of the game is just, you know, immersion breaking, because that's just your origin story. I don't even know if there's multiple origin stories for these different races, because I just played the Lin. However, I do know that, you know, at the beginning of the game, it's a little bit immersion breaking, and I did notice a lot of invisible walls. However, you know, you do have a lot of mobility, right? Absolutely, yeah, you can freaking jump in the air, double jump, you can glide, and there's a teleportation system, kind of like I guess, Guild Wars 2 or the Elder Scrolls, where you can teleport to different towns, and they kind of explain it that you are like walking through the wind, like you kind of jump into the sky and whatever. They explain it all kung fu wise and sciencey, and I do like that. They try to immerse you into this game. However, there's just a lot of immersion breaking things, right? Okay, so for instance, kind of similar to Elder Scrolls Online, whenever you go into a building, there is a load screen. However, I like actually how Blade & Soul does it, because whenever you walk into a building, instead of blacking out, going into a load screen, you just kind of pause for a second, and it just kind of phases you through. And so the transition is a little bit easier to understand. It's a lot less immersion breaking, but still, you know, it's there. It's a hitch, and just like, you know, invisible walls and stuff like that. So for a game that basically is sold based on its kung fu-ness, on its mobility, because you can jump around, glide, and do all sorts of crazy kung fu shit, for a game that's sold on that, it really sucks how restrictive the game actually is. It's not like you can just go fly and jump all around the place. You can't just go run through a forest or climb a giant mountain or anything like that. There might be some areas that you can do that. Maybe just the start of the game is like that. However, that's, you know, what we're doing. This is a video on my first impressions, and it just kind of was restrictive. So anyways, let's talk about the game. There is PvP. However, I don't know exactly what you can do in that PvP. It wasn't really made clear, wasn't exactly explained for as a new player. One thing that did bug me though is that you have this login bonus or daily bonus roulette thing that's just kind of very uproarious. The UI design is really good, and you can customize your UI, and I do really freaking appreciate that they don't use 1 through 10 or 1 through 0. They actually use QWE, Z, XC, V. You know, they use all the action RPG buttons instead of the MMO buttons. Dragon Nest could actually learn a lot from that. So, yeah, the overall layout is pretty good. However, it kind of looks ugly. Yeah, you know, there's just like a whole lot on the freaking screen, and it gets really annoying. So overall, first impressions, the game looks really good. Graphically, you know, remember, this is kind of an older game, and it looks really good graphically despite that. And artistically, a very unique and original art style. Plus, you have this very unique world building, because it is Kung Fu based, it's not medieval or magic based. And then again, also the unique mechanics of the game, which I guess we'll end the video on that, talking about that. The mechanics, I could probably relate it a lot to Guild Wars 2. I don't think it's as floaty, or not floaty, but free. It's not as freeing as World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2, but it does have like a pseudo tab targeting system. It definitely feels really good for a Kung Fu game. It's just not as actiony or as true aim, true physics, true combat, action combat as like Terra, but I think it does kind of compete in that same sort of scene. You know, it is tab targeting, yes, but it's also like really actiony tab targeting. It's kind of hard to define it, guys, honestly, because tab targeting the technology for that has really come a long way. I don't want to just say it's tab targeting, because it's not just tab targeting. There's a whole lot going on under the hood, so that the player really doesn't feel like it's tab targeting. It really feels intuitive, it feels really good, and I just want to get that across. But yes, it is tab targeting, yes. But also kind of similar to a lot of Eastern games is that you have a lot of abilities that will somewhat lock you in place, and then you kind of perform a combo or a maneuver. And so, you know, with that in mind, it's not going to feel as floaty as World of Warcraft. You do have a lot of freedom. It's not standstill in any way. You do have a lot of freedom, but you do also have these abilities, kind of similar to Guild Wars 2, that can launch you, that have huge combos that kind of like pursue each other. So you use an ability and you use it again and you do another combo, and you know, you do all this crazy Kung Fu stuff, and it feels really good. So overall, I like the approach that Blade & Soul has for combat. Yes, it's tab targeting, but that's necessary for what you can do in the game. It's not standstill though, okay? So remember that. You are jumping and doing all this stuff. You're doing Kung Fu moves, man. Everybody's Kung Fu fighting. It's pretty awesome, and I really do enjoy the game. However, one immersion breaking thing is that you do have these sort of traversal abilities where you can double jump, you can glide, and you can move really freaking fast. You can sprint. However, as soon as you go into combat, no, you can't do those things anymore, and I don't like that. I think it would actually be really cool if we could still sprint and jump and do all sorts of crazy Kung Fu stuff while fighting, even if it's just PvP, I don't know, whatever. It's a game, okay? And Blade & Soul is quite aware that it is a game, and it makes you aware that it is a game sometimes because the immersion is broken, which I would say is a downside. But if you can play Blade & Soul like it's an arcade game, like it's an online action RPG that happens to be very multiplayer, you're gonna have a lot of fun. But if you're looking for like a World of Warcraft scenario where it's a giant open epic world that you can explore and do a million bajillion things in and interact with a million bajillion players, you're going to be a little bit disappointed. It is an MMO, but if you play it as an online action RPG, you're going to have a lot more fun. So yeah, that's all I got to say. This was a Blade & Soul, my first impression at least of the game. Beta is going to be available October 30th, so get excited for that. And be excited for our next video. Like and subscribe so that you can stay notified whenever they come out, and we'll see you again next time. Welcome back, Attack. Today we're going to be talking about the top 10 free-to-play MMOs for this year, for 2015, and I think across all the genres for free-to-plays, we've seen so much innovation in MOBAs, in MMOs, in like card games. We've seen so many new things this past year, and hopefully, maybe, probably so, 2015 is going to be just as exciting. This is our